300 miles from the Iranian coast, 5,000 Americans are waking up right now inside a steel city the size of 3 football fields laid end to end. They did not choose when to wake up. A flight deck alarm did that for them. Outside their window, if they had one, the Persian Gulf is dark, flat, and full of Iranian fast boats that have been watching this ship for 11 days straight. The USS George H.W. Bush is not on a training exercise. It is one of 3 American aircraft carriers currently surrounding the Islamic Republic of Iran, and every single person aboard it is doing something most people on shore will never think about: learning to live at war, inside a machine worth more than the entire GDP of Bolivia. This is not the war you see on the news. This is the war that happens before the cameras turn on, and after they turn off. The question most people ask about an aircraft carrier is, how does something that big even float? That is the wrong question. The right question, the one no Pentagon briefing answers, the one no Navy recruitment video shows, is this: what does it actually cost a human being to live inside the most powerful weapon on Earth for 9 months in a war zone, 300 miles from a country that has promised to sink it? Before we go further, if you had to guess, how many hours of sleep does the average sailor on a carrier get per night during active operations in the Persian Gulf? Drop your answer in the comments. By the end of this documentary, you will understand why that number tells you more about American military power than any missile count ever could. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now. We release a new documentary every week, and what is coming next will make this one look like the warm-up act. The USS George H.W. Bush is 1,092 feet long. To walk its full length at a normal pace takes 4 minutes. To understand its scale in terms a brain can actually process, if you parked it on 5th Avenue in Manhattan, it would stretch from 34th Street past 42nd Street, with room left over. It displaces 104,000 tons of water, more weight than 700 fully loaded Boeing 747s stacked on a scale. Its 2 nuclear reactors generate enough electricity to power a city of 100,000 people for a year without refueling. Its flight deck covers 4.5 acres, roughly 3 full New York City blocks, and on that deck every day, aircraft weighing up to 70,000 pounds are being launched from 0 to 165 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds. That is faster than a Formula One car accelerates across its entire first 100 meters. And it happens, on an active deployment, roughly 150 times per day. The ship carries 90 aircraft. It travels at speeds the Navy does not officially disclose, but independent analysis puts it above 30 knots, fast enough to cross the Atlantic in under 5 days. Its full cost, including the air wing that flies off it, approaches $26 billion. The hull alone, $13.1 billion. The reactor fuel, classified. The 90,000 gallons of aviation fuel consumed by its aircraft each day, replenished every 72 hours by underway replenishment ships that shadow the carrier group like supply trucks trailing a moving army. The crew it takes to operate all of it, 5,000 people. 5,000 human beings sealed inside a steel hull, sailing in tight patterns through some of the most contested waters on the planet. There is no comparable structure in human history that has ever been sent to sea with this combination of firepower, self-sufficiency, and political consequence. Not in World War II, not during the Cold War. The Roman Colosseum, which once held 80,000 spectators, had more square footage above ground, but it never moved, never fought, and never carried nuclear weapons. The International Space Station, humanity's most expensive engineering project, cost $150 billion and houses 6 people. The George H.W. Bush costs 1/12 of that and houses 5,000. While simultaneously operating a fully functional air force. What the carrier is, at its core, is this: a floating airfield that America can park anywhere in the world within 72 hours, without asking anyone's permission. And in April 2026, America has parked 3 of them around Iran. To understand what 5,000 people living inside that hull actually experience, you have to understand the geometry of the ship, not the flight deck, the part you see in the Navy recruitment footage, with jets launching into orange sunsets, the part below the waterline, the part that never appears in any promotional material, the part where the sailors sleep. On a Nimitz-class carrier, the class the George H.W. Bush belongs to, There are approximately 3,000 enlisted sailors who sleep in what the Navy calls berthing compartments. Each compartment holds between 50 and 100 people. Each sailor is assigned a rack, a sleeping bunk, that measures 75 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 21 inches tall. That is the space above your face when you lie down. 21 inches. Less than the width of a standard kitchen cabinet door. About the distance from your chin to the top of your head, if someone held a ruler there. The sailors call them coffin racks, not as dark humor, as a precise description of the available volume. Inside that 21 inches of space, a sailor keeps everything that is not their uniform. Personal photographs, a paperback book that has been read 3 times, a phone that cannot connect to any network in the Persian Gulf. The bunk below is another sailor. The bunk above is another sailor. There are typically 3 racks stacked in each column. The hum of the ship's engines is constant. It never stops. After 2 weeks, experienced sailors say they stop hearing it. Until the moment it does stop, at which point every person in the berthing compartment wakes up immediately, because silence on a nuclear carrier means something has gone wrong. At any given hour of the day, roughly 1,500 of those 5,000 sailors are asleep. Another 2,000 are on duty in some capacity. The remaining 1,500 are in the transitional state that military life creates and civilians rarely think about, eating in one of the ship's 3 mess halls, waiting in line for one of the ship's 60 showers for 5,000 people, or working out in one of the 2 gyms located deep in the ship's interior, below the waterline, where the only way to know whether it is day or night is to check a clock. The mess halls operate 24 hours a day and serve 18,000 meals every single day. 18,000 meals. More than the entire daily output of 60 full-service restaurants, produced in a kitchen that pitches and rolls with every swell of the Persian Gulf, staffed by sailors who are also on a watch rotation, who also sleep in coffin racks, and who are also, every time the 1MC crackles with a general quarters alarm, expected to drop everything and move to battle stations within 90 seconds. There is one more number that defines life on this ship, and it lives at the opposite end of the social architecture from the coffin rack. 300 feet above those bunks, connected to the ship's command structure by a private elevator, the carrier's commanding officer, a Navy captain, typically with over 25 years of service, lives in quarters that include a private bedroom, a private bathroom, a small dining area, and a dedicated steward who manages his meals separately from the 18,000 being served below. The captain's suite is, by any civilian standard, modest. By the standard of the 5,000 people below him, it is a private apartment in a city where everyone else shares everything. That contrast is not a moral failure. It is the intentional architecture of a military hierarchy that requires one person to make decisions affecting thousands of lives, and requires that person to be rested, coherent, and isolated from the noise long enough to think clearly. The coffin rack and the captain's suite exist on the same ship for the same reason: mission success. They are the 2 ends of the same answer to the same question. The question is, how do you keep 5,000 people functional in a war zone for 9 months without a single one of them being able to leave? Here is what nobody in the Pentagon briefing tells you about the USS George H.W. Bush right now. The carrier is the most powerful single military platform ever built. That is not in dispute. What is also not in dispute, but almost never said out loud in public, is that it is also the largest single target in the history of naval warfare. In 2019, a classified war game conducted by the US military, later partially reported by Bloomberg, simulated a conflict between American carrier groups and a technologically advanced adversary using coordinated drone swarms and hypersonic missile saturation attacks. The result, by the simulation's end, was not ambiguous. The carrier groups did not survive intact. The simulation was not designed around Iran specifically. But the lesson it produced was the one that has been quietly reshaping American carrier doctrine ever since. A $13 billion ship carrying 5,000 people and 90 aircraft is only as survivable as the defensive envelope surrounding it can guarantee. And no defensive envelope in existence today has been proven against a full saturation attack. Iran, as of April 2026, possesses an estimated 3,000 ballistic and cruise missiles. It operates a fleet of fast attack boats, some armed with anti-ship missiles, that number in the hundreds. It has demonstrated since February 28th A willingness to use asymmetric assets in ways that have surprised American naval planners more than once. The Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile-wide choke point through which 20% of the world's oil supply flows every day, sits 180 miles from where the George H.W. Bush is currently operating. 20% of the world's oil, through a gap 21 miles wide, watched by a country that has now watched the United States park 3 aircraft carriers on its maritime doorstep, and that has, in its military doctrine, explicitly wargamed what it calls an asymmetric response to exactly this scenario. The question no admiral says out loud in any press conference is this: if Iran fires everything it has at a single carrier group in a coordinated, simultaneous saturation salvo, not one missile, not 10, but the kind of mass attack its doctrine has been quietly building toward for 15 years, how many of those missiles does the carrier's defensive envelope actually stop? The George H.W. Bush is protected by Aegis-equipped destroyers, F/A-18 Combat Air Patrol, and its own close-in weapon systems. The Navy's official position is that the carrier battle group is fully capable of defending against the Iranian threat. What the Navy does not publish is the margin. And it is the margin that the 5,000 people sleeping in those coffin racks cannot know, cannot ask about, and have chosen, by enlisting, to trust. On April 24, 2026, Al Jazeera confirmed what satellite tracking had already shown. The USS George H.W. Bush had joined 2 other American carriers in the waters surrounding Iran, forming the most concentrated display of American naval force in the Persian Gulf since the First Gulf War in 1991. This is not a drill. This is not a show of force exercise with a scheduled end date published in a NOTAM. The carrier is there because the United States is in an active conflict with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a conflict that began February 28th and has not ended, and because American military doctrine has, for 70 years, responded to the same way to every escalating crisis in a region it considers strategically vital. It sends a carrier. For the 5,000 people aboard the George H.W. Bush, the difference between a deployment and a war zone deployment is not abstract. It is procedural. The General Quarters Alarm, battle stations, is no longer a drill event that interrupts the schedule. It is part of the schedule. Sleep rotations are compressed. Mail from home, already slow by civilian standards, has become slower. The ship's mental health staff, the Navy assigns 1 psychologist per carrier, a ratio of 1 counselor for every 5,000 people, which is lower than the staffing ratio at most American high schools, is operating at capacity. The sailors aboard know, with a precision that civilians rarely have, exactly how far they are from the Iranian coastline at any given moment. The ship's internal communication system, known as the 1MC, announces position and operational status updates throughout the day. 312 miles, 289 miles. The number changes as the carrier adjusts its operational pattern. Every sailor knows the number, not because they are afraid of it, but because knowing the number, and continuing to do your job anyway, is the entire point of what they signed up for. If you made it this far, you already understand why this channel exists. Hit like if you want more documentaries like this one. It is the only way YouTube shows us to new people. The USS George H.W. Bush was commissioned in January 2009. It is the 10th and final Nimitz-class carrier ever built. It will serve until approximately 2058, when it is scheduled to be replaced by a Gerald R. Ford-class carrier, the next generation of American flat tops that the Navy is currently constructing at Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, at a rate of roughly 1 ship per decade. The Ford class costs $13.3 billion per hull, carries the same number of aircraft, but operates with 600 fewer crew members than a Nimitz-class ship. 600 fewer people, same mission, same firepower. That reduction is achieved entirely through automation. Automated weapons elevators that replace the 100 sailors previously needed to move ordnance from the magazine to the flight deck. An electromagnetic aircraft launch system that replaces the steam catapults the George H.W. Bush still uses today, and advanced arresting gear that requires far less mechanical maintenance per arrested landing than the existing wire systems. The Navy's 30-year shipbuilding plan, submitted to Congress in fiscal year 2026, allocates $32.4 billion to carrier construction through 2035. That plan was designed around a threat environment that is already different from the one it was written to address. The Office of Naval Intelligence's most recent unclassified assessment of Chinese naval power, released in late 2025, noted that the People's Liberation Army Navy is now producing major surface combatants at a rate approximately 5 times faster than the United States. China currently operates 3 aircraft carriers. It has 2 more under active construction. It has publicly stated its intention to operate 6 full carrier battle groups by 2035. Against that strategic background, the 3 carriers currently surrounding Iran represent not only a war mission, but a forward calculation that the United States can concentrate this level of Pacific-oriented naval force in the Persian Gulf, sustain it for months, and still have enough residual capacity in the Pacific to give Beijing pause. Whether that calculation is correct will not be resolved in this documentary. It will be resolved in decisions being made right now, in budget meetings and intelligence assessments and naval exercises that the public will not see for years. But the carrier, the physical object, the steel hull, the nuclear reactors, the 90 aircraft, the 5,000 people, is the physical embodiment of that calculation. It is what it looks like when a country decides it can afford to be everywhere at once. Return, for a moment, to the coffin rack, to the 21 inches of space above a sailor's face in the Persian Gulf, 300 miles from a country that has publicly promised to sink the ship around them. The average enlisted sailor on the USS George H.W. Bush during active Persian Gulf operations sleeps between 5 and 6 hours per night. Not because the Navy requires it. The official standard is 7 to 8, but because the operational tempo of a carrier at war compresses everything. The watch schedule, the maintenance rotations, the flight deck cycle that runs through the night, the machinery that requires human attention around the clock regardless of what any sleep policy document says. 5 hours. In a coffin rack, 21 inches above your face. In a war zone, you did not start and cannot leave. Earning between $22,000 and $38,000 per year, depending on rank and years of service. That is not a mistake. The most junior sailors operating the most expensive piece of military equipment in human history are compensated at roughly the median income of a part-time retail worker in the United States. That number is not in this documentary to manufacture outrage. It is here because it is the most clarifying fact in the entire story of American military power. The $13 billion is the number Congress appropriates. The 5 hours of sleep is the number that actually keeps the carrier operational. The $22,000 salary is the number that tells you everything about the social contract that makes it possible for the United States to maintain 11 carrier battle groups simultaneously, a feat no other nation in human history has achieved, or come close to achieving, or currently plans to attempt. The carrier does not run on nuclear fuel alone. It runs on the decision, made by 5,000 people, renewed every morning when the alarm sounds at 0:30, that the mission is worth the cost. Not the dollar cost, the personal cost, the 5 hours, the 21 inches, the 9 months away from everyone who knows your name. The $13 billion is the number that makes the news. But the number that actually keeps the George H.W. Bush in position, at war, 300 miles from Iran, is the one you now know. 5 hours, multiplied by 5,000, every single night. And somewhere in a budget office in Washington, that number does not appear on a single line item. It never has. It is the only number that has ever actually mattered. And it is the one that America keeps asking its youngest sailors to pay in the dark, in a coffin rack, in a sea that does not care about any of it. That is what $13 billion buys. Everything else is just steel.